Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 3, Episode 15 of the Senstennial podcast. This week, we'll be discussing some of the comments that Pierre Dorion had on his interviews with TSN 1200 and Bruce Garrioch. We're going to talk about Matt Murray and how well he's played recently, what it'll take to get Nick Paul signed, and then we'll talk about some trade targets that the Sens might be looking at. So we'll kick it off talking with Pierre Dorion's comments, and he spent some time on TSN 1200. He went over a number of things. We're not going to touch on the injuries because I think most people kind of know where those are at and timelines for those, but we'll talk some of the juicier things here. And right off the bat, he said that he was going to be spending some time in the OHL soon to scout not just the Sens prospects that are in the OHL this season, but also some of the ones who might be eligible in the 2022 draft coming up. So that is kind of a little interesting. I mean, Sens have a top pick. Not surprising that they'll be looking at guys like Shane Wright. I believe Ty Nelson's another one. So those are a couple guys there. But aside from that, he just talked about how this team's been out of the gate and needing to be better out of the gate. And then just talking about the trade deadline. So we'll just kind of go through some of that, and we'll kick it off with Bennett. Bennett, what did you think about some of Pierre Dorion's comments on TSN 1200?
Yeah, there are a few things that jumped out for me from this interview. First and foremost was, again, Pierre was sort of lamenting the start that the Sens had and the fact that, they should have been a playoff team this year. And we sort of discussed this, at length in the earlier episodes this season, talking about the reasons why we aren't a playoff team this year. Which are largely self-inflicted and inflicted, in some cases by Dorian himself. So this bit didn't really land for me. He's saying that, it's like we've discussed it already. It's like poor amateur scouting, poor recruitment, a lack of depth that got exposed by injuries from the very beginning of the season. All of these things are why the Sens have floundered. And some of those are like Dorian can't control the injuries, but he absolutely controls, the questionable recruitment of guys like Michael Del Zotto, who has been completely missing, from the lineup recently. Is he down in the minors? I think he's down in the minors, eh?
Yeah, he's in the minors.
And so he's, he was one of the big name guys that they recruited this offseason. He's just a complete non-factor. So just too many misses like that are why we are where we are. And so again, I thought his lamenting of the team's lack of progress was fell on deaf ears for me. I did like what he was saying about he seems to like Stützle at center, and he gets him the puck more often, which is a good thing. That's great. That's what we want as fans want as well. So that was nice. He's happy with Dorian said he's happy with Stützle's progress as a prospect so far. I think we could all pretty much agree on that. So that's good. One other thing that really jumped out at me, he warned that Batherson may not be the same player when he returns from his injury, which is a high ankle sprain.
I think he meant this season.
Yeah, and that's what I understood it to mean too, that he wouldn't look like himself right away. But that sort of got me thinking, and I really don't see any particular reason why Batherson should play at all for the remainder of the season. He's too important to the development of this team to risk rushing him back in a season that's already over, essentially. So I will be really disappointed if we see him, forced back into the lineup earlier than he needs to be, just to risk aggravating what is an already dicey injury in a season that was lost 2 months ago. So I'm going to be watching with, considerable interest and some anxiety about how they handle his return from injury, because I think there is potential here for it to be botched, and I don't think any of us want to see that happen.
Yeah, the one thing, though, that I think they probably will take into consideration with all the injuries is this is a season where, again, the Senators aren't going to be in the hunt for the playoffs unless they pull a Hamburglar 2.0 with Matt Murray. But I think that even in the same interview, Dorian said that with Shane Pinto, they're not going to rush him back. They're going to make sure that he is 100% without a doubt ready to go. And if they're going to take extreme caution with him. I think they'll do the same with Batherson, because this season he showed that he could be a star forward in the league, and they're not going to want to risk that, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. If he's not going to be 100% before the end of the season, then don't try and get him into a few games at the end. Just let him take the summer off, fully conditioned, and then come back. But
he's young enough; he'll be able to recover. So yeah, don't rush it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and the thing with a high ankle sprain is every single one is different. It's one of the worst injuries you could possibly have in sports, because there's no real timeline you can put on it. Some guys take 6 months, and then others take 2.5 to 3 months. It was a good sign that recently they had said that Batherson, his recovery time was faster than what a lot of people have seen. And if you guys recall, Joey Decord had this injury last season, which kept him out for most of the season, and then Gus was able to sort of supplant him in the goalie rankings. But I can see him coming back, no issue. As I said, if his recovery is that quick, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see him in mid-March, late March. But considering what we've heard about the Sens doctors previously, and The Athletic just put out an article about how teams handle it wasn't specifically about that, but it was agents being polled about certain things. One of them being, if you would steer your player towards a certain team because of ownership, or, how good they market the stars in the NHL, and all that sort of stuff. And one of the questions was, how do you think injuries are handled in the NHL? And a lot of agents said poorly, because team doctors have two things. They want their players to get better, but also they want the players back on the ice as soon as possible. And this isn't just an exclusively Sens sort of thing. This is a problem throughout the NHL. And apparently Kyle Dubas, as a GM, is somebody who really focuses on getting second and third opinions on injuries, because you can't always trust a one opinion. So all of that long-winded thing to say is, if Drake Batherson gets a good to go from this doctor, I wouldn't be surprised, especially considering Josh Norris just went and got a second opinion on his shoulder. I wouldn't be surprised if he does the same and just confirms that he should be getting back on the ice and starting playing again. As for the Dorian interview, I think a couple things stood out to me. One of them was he referred to himself in the third person. He said Pierre Dorion is one of the biggest Brandstrom fans. And I thought that was hilarious. And he really should be. He put out a lot of he put a lot of emphasis on this trade when he made it. And there's a lot riding on it still to this day. Yeah. But it makes me wonder that if he pushed DJ at some point right around after he broke his hand and said, look, he played well in the 2 games before. I need you to give him a legit look, because I need to know if I need to move on from this kid or not. And frankly, if there is anybody considering the Senators' future without Eric Brandstrom in their top 6 defense, they're nuts. He has been so good defensively, offensively. He's looked magnificent. He's just not piling up the points as one does just yet. But, he looks so much more effective on that right side than Zaitsev ever has with Thomas Chabot. So it leads me to wonder if Dorian said, listen, I need you to play Brandstrom, because if you don't, I don't know what the hell this kid can do. So if he's getting that shot, good on Pierre Dorion for righting that ship and righting his development, because Brandstrom said previously, he has never had more confidence in his game, period. And then one of the other things that sort of stuck out was that he's looking to make hockey trades. I think that's awesome because, a hockey trade generally means you're trading out something to bring in a good asset. And hopefully. Yeah. I mean, they're not perfect, but the trade was 1-for-1, Hall for Larson. So I think it would be great if the Senators were able to make a legit trade that improves the team going forward, and it just makes sense. Like if that means giving up a prospect like Sokolov, Yerventi, Boucher, or even one of Thompson or JBD to improve our top six, like I would do that.
Yeah.
But time will definitely tell.
Yeah, that was a lot to take in there, Matt. But on the trade front, no, I agree. The Sens, it was interesting. Like he was just saying, we don't want to trade for rentals. Like we want to trade for players before the deadline that'll be here next season. And so I basically just took that. He wants to make deals now so that the players can get adjusted, have chemistry with one another. It's like going into next season, you're not just adding a guy like 2 weeks before training camp, having them come in and then them never developing chemistry with anyone and just kind of being another Pierre Dorion signing that doesn't work out. And I think we all saw that with Derek Stepan, right? That deal was made just before the season starts. He comes to training camp. He had to leave his wife and newborn child, come to Ottawa, and then he just wasn't ready to go ever. And he didn't play well. He changed his jersey number, and then he was injured for the rest of the season. So,
what a bad trade.
Yeah. It was just not good. And so I'm hoping that Dorion's comments, he's basically looking back on that and reflecting and being like, yeah, we want our players to be here ahead of time so that we're good to go right when the season opens up next year. And I think we
maybe don't trade for an aging asset.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. The Sens definitely have a couple positions that they could fill. Hopefully one of the players they draft in the top 5, if that's where they end up picking, hopefully whichever player that is, they could join the team after a season or two, and that'll add some more depth or even top end talent, depending on what the player or who the player is, I should say. But yeah, so I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting. The whole, I want to make a hockey deal or two. And he did mention the summer, but he also said before the trade deadline. So I think he just really wants to make a trade. But he also did say it's
Who
not
wouldn't though.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, for Ottawa specifically, yeah, true. But just Ottawa specifically, when's the last time they made a deal of substantial value to the team, right? Like the Holden trade last summer, I guess Holden's provide stability, but is that what you consider
I don't think that's considered a hockey trade. It's more of a dumping an asset.
Oh, no,
trade.
no. I wasn't trying to say hockey trade. I was trying to say where you're bringing in a player of actual value to the organization. Stanford's been okay. I think he's been underwhelming compared to what we wanted out of him. He hasn't been bad. He's just kind of there. So anyway, I'll let Bennett chime in here on the whole Dorion comments on the hockey deals.
I think I agree to a point. The Sens should be trying to make trades that will benefit the team now and in the future, not just trading for more draft picks, stuff like that. That being said, I think that we should also trade for draft picks. There are guys that may or may not have a future with this team that we should be offloading. And I think people get general manager. Well, I think the media and then as a result, general managers get twitchy about, being labeled as a seller or a buyer or whatever it is. But it's the reality is you should always flip guys for picks if they don't have a future with your team and you're not going to re-sign them. And if they're on an expiring contract, or even if they have 1 year left, you should always make those deals. So it's yes, we want the team to be making hockey trades and bringing guys we can actually get excited about and think may be able to contribute to this team for years to come. But equally, we should not be closed off to taking calls on guys Nick Paul is a player we're going to discuss later who, it's up in the air at this point whether, he intends to re-sign with the team. If we don't have him signed, we 1000% need to trade him because he's worth something. But anyway.
And he did touch on that a bit. He did say that they would move pending UFAs prior to the trade deadline.
Yeah.
If he just didn't think that there was a future with them on the team, and that any people who I guess weren't traded at the deadline and were still there afterwards. So let's say Nick Paul, for example, then they'll try and sign him after the deadline. But it was kind of weird with Anton Forsberg, him saying we might trade him, we might not trade him.
Yeah,
that was kind of weird. I think you should just trade him. Goalies are a hot commodity this year. Even depth goalies like Montembeault was picked up on waivers and he had not good numbers career-wise. I think Forsberg, I know a lot of the criticism on him over the past month is the goals he lets in. Some of them are really weak, and it seems like every game he has one really weak goal he lets in. But overall, I find that he can be a decent backup. When you put him in net, I'm not oh God, Forsberg's in net, this is going to be a blowout. It's okay, we'll see what Forsberg we get, right? But I don't think he's an absolute tire fire. And I think a team like Edmonton could look to add him as really cheap goaltending depth. They're up against the cap. They could use a guy who is not Koskinen or
Mike
Smith or
Stuart Skinner. Yeah.
So I don't think you hold on to him after the deadline.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the mentality that he should still be having. There's nothing wrong with unloading assets if you're not in a competitive status. Moving a guy like Anton Forsberg, if you get a fifth or a fourth for that guy, you picked up on waivers. That's just positive value regardless. Yeah. Is Dylan Gambrell going to be around next year? Probably not, considering all of the centers we're going to be having in the next few seasons. Is Adam Gaudette. I personally would like to keep him around. I think he would be a solid bottom six option. But if you move him and there's interest and you can get a good pick, move along. But you also have to start determining what the heck your team is going to look like in the next couple of seasons. Are you bringing in guys that are going to be the makeup of your bottom six? I know he had mentioned he wants to look to promote from within, from Belleville. And I love that idea. That's why you draft guys. You want to bring them in and make them have an impact. Like Mark Kostelic is look like a solid bottom six guy, probably nothing more than a fourth line player. But, you have a guy like that. You have Parker Kelly. If somebody calls on Austin Watson, that's a high character guy who comes into your lineup, bangs some bodies and has a good night, All of those are intangibles that playoff teams always love. And we have so many of these intangible guys that could be moving on. It just kind of makes sense to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. But, guys like Tyler Ennis, Gaudette, and Nick Paul, obviously, you want to keep those guys around so you can have a solid bottom six going forward. And quite honestly, if somebody calls on Connor Brown, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I would. Yeah, that's absolutely fair. But I just think he is a guy that could very well fetch you a first round pick. If there was enough interest in you, drive his price up. We all know what he does defensively, and he can.
So my only point I'm going to make on that is, what do you hope to gain from a first round pick that if you're getting it from a contending team, you're hoping to get a guy in, let's say, the 25 to 32 range. You're just hoping that player is at least a Connor Brown. So it's what's the point of making that trade then when he's already a core member of the team? He's not even that old. Yeah. And I just think that he's a core piece of this team. And so going next season, if he's your third line right wing and you bring in somebody in free agency, or trade to fill in the top six, then you're really starting to look solid on that right side.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think like Sokolov is ready to fill the right side yet.
No.
And Gaudette's looked good, but I don't know if I trust him enough to be
defensively. No, not at all. But my point is you get that first round pick, and that first round pick can turn into but most likely it would be a trade chip. You look to improve your roster. Like, yes, you're getting rid of Connor Brown, but if you can improve your top six with a contender's first rounder as opposed to your own, that's money.
Yeah, but I mean, at that point, then you might as well just use Connor Brown in a trade if he has that value. But I just don't think that they should. But anyway, let's briefly touch on Nick Paul, because we kind of danced around it a little bit, but we didn't actually hit on it. So, Nick Paul, I don't know if we're all in agreement, but I know that I would like to see the Sens re-sign him for a reasonable contract. Now, Frank Saravelli came out and said that Nick Paul allegedly rejected a 3-year, $2 million a year contract, which I think is fair. I think Nick Paul has kind of earned a bit more than that. Now, it's interesting because in the interview with, I believe it was Garrioch, Dorian actually said that it's not just about the dollar amount. He's trying to look at their cap over the next 2 to 4 years and seeing how they can maintain cap compliancy with a lot of guys. And he did say, like, coming off entry level, looking for term contracts, which I kind of like that, because I was almost hinting that the discussions with guys like Norris and Stützle are going to be like term contracts rather than bridges. And I think if you can just get everybody signed till they're, 27 to 29, like, that'd be solid. So anyway, I don't know what you guys think about that, but like, do you think there's a certain dollar amount the Sens should cap his next contract at, or do you think like they should trade him, or what are your thoughts on that?
The way I always kind of look at bottom six players, and even, to an extent, like a top 9 player, is their point value. And I always equate point value to their dollar amount. So if I'm paying Nick Paul $2 million, like, I want to see him at least having 20 points. If he has 25 points, I offer him 2.5, like stuff like that. But I just don't know if I'm offering Nick Paul more than 3 years at 2.5, quite honestly. Yes, he brings a lot of value. He's a great guy in the community. He just started that Points for Paul program. But quite honestly, like, I just can't justify paying a guy who has never cracked 30 points in his career, paying him more than 2.5 mil, especially when Tyler Ennis makes peanuts.
Yeah.
And like, if you aren't a better player visually than Tyler Ennis, I can't justify paying you more than he makes. It's asinine.
I just wouldn't want the Sens to sign him to like a Barclay Goodrow or, Blake Coleman-esque contract, because that would just be, you can't do that with depth guys. But anyway, Bennett, what are your thoughts on it?
I absolutely agree with other Matt here that 2.5 million on average 3 years is like the max I would do. I think Paul has been an asset to this team in the last couple of seasons, but with an asterisk of, how every time Bruce Garrioch is on the panel and he says that Paul is a guy that can play up and down the lineup, this season has proven that to be false. He cannot play up and down the lineup. He can be an excellent third line player, and he's getting like cratered on the second line most nights. The defensive, he has great defensive instincts, and when he's not paired against the other team's star players, he is an excellent defensive player who brings a lot to the team on the penalty kill and at 5-on-5. But he cannot, make it on the second line. It's too high for where his skill set is at. He can't hang with it. And so I think that puts a pretty firm cap on what his value is to this team, because, if you're starting to pay someone $3 million, like, I think that's something like we're paying Connor Brown, off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think it's 3 point something.
Yeah,
and Connor Brown
3.6,
can play on the second line and be all right. He's not a first line guy, but can play in the second line and be okay. Yeah. Paul, it's not there for him, and so I think that limits his the kind of contract he's going to be able to get with this team or with any other team. He currently has 13 points in 40 games. It's a minus 14, whereas last season he finished the season a plus 5, and on a team that was mostly getting owned last year, and he ended up being pretty good defensively and sticking with that the whole year. This season it hasn't been there, and it's because he's been forced to play further up the lineup than he's capable of, and that tells the story as well. I want him to stick around. I think he'd be a great third line player for this team once we have a competent top 6. But he's not the answer to that top 6 problem. And guys who can't help you there have limited value.
All right, well, let's take a look at another Senators player who's been playing quite well recently, and that would be Matt Murray. So Matt Murray in his last 7 games that he started is 5-0-2. He's got a .944 save percentage in those games. And his season save percentage, which was, I believe, after January 1st, like after that game against the Leafs, I think it was like .883. Like it was bad. He's now sitting at a .914 for the season. So he has drastically risen that number.
Yeah. It's incredible that he's brought it up that high.
Oh yeah, he was in a hole, and now it's looking much better. So yeah, he's looked great. And like Ben, I'll kick it off with you. What have you thought about Matt Murray and how he's been playing lately?
Yeah, it's been fantastic to see. I mean, this is a guy that had a pretty miserable start to his time in Ottawa between last season and especially the first half of this season. He was playing really poorly. He wasn't stringing any results together. This by far the best that we've seen him play. And even still, I mean, he's only played 41 games for the Sens. He has started fewer games than you would expect him to start in like one regular season, in pre-COVID times before, all the interruptions and stuff. So if you think of it that way, if you think of we're partway through his first season, quote unquote, with the team, and he's starting to put it together, then that's kind of normal. And I think like the fact that we refer to last season as last season when it was really only I can't even remember how many games now, like 38, 40 something.
56. I think it was 56.
56. Yeah. 56. I mean, it was a shortened season, and we refer to it like it was a whole season, but it wasn't. And so I think he's still very early in his career with the Senators. I think equally, we can't sit here and say that, the signs have been there the whole time. They haven't been. We're looking at, 5.5 weeks of good play amidst, a year and a half of generally poor play. So the jury remains out as to whether he can do this long term. But if he can play at this level or even a little bit below this level for the rest of this season, I think will go a huge way to sort of creating a role for him for this team going forward. Because it's hard to go out and acquire goalies. It really is. And if we can have someone that can competently hold the fort, provide consistently league average goaltending as this team gets better all around, then it'll just be such a load off of, the team to have that. So I really hope that he can continue to play at this level and show us why we wanted to go out and acquire him.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. One of the things I've definitely noticed with Murray recently is the fact that more stops are sort of going his way. He has way less crappy goals going in on him. Unlucky breaks, odd man rushes, all of that. It's been really nice to see that he's being given opportunities from the defense to make the saves as opposed to just them going in. He seems to be really well positioned. He's being a little more aggressive at the top of his crease. He's not getting beat glove side, and that's not being a meme anymore. it's really nice to see. And like last night, he had an excellent save against Sheraganovich, and he tracked it well. He knew it was going to be there, and he made the save. Basically won us the game last night, hands down. And if Matt Murray is continuously able to do that, I might change my tune. But like him propping up his stats, to me, it's like, okay, if there's a market for him, like I would probably get rid of him. But if he's able to, string it together and make me eat my words, I want a starter. I love Philip Gustafson. I want to see him succeed. If Forsberg is gone and Matt Murray plays well, having Matt Murray play, 45 games and Gus playing 42, 38. That's excellent. Having a solid tandem that gets you through the season. That's what we paid him for. And I would really like to see Matt Murray sort of come back to who he was when he won 2 cups.
Yeah, definitely. So earlier we were talking about Pierre Dorion and the trade market. And there's been a few names that have been circulating on social media that we'll kind of touch on a little bit and just see if they're kind of the type of guys that you could see the Sens acquiring or might fit in on the Sens. And we'll kick it off with Conor Garland. So Vancouver actually just acquired him, I believe, this past offseason. He's 25 years old, plays right wing. They got him in the Oliver Ekman-Larsson deal. So then they signed him to a 5-year deal at $4.95 million. He has no signing bonuses in his contract. This season, I think he's been a bit underwhelming. He's had 24 points in 41 games. So he's played okay, but he fits the bill of having all the traits of a top 6 forward. He just hasn't had the production in Vancouver. So yeah, Matt, what do you think about him as a potential fit?
There's 2 things that I see. I know that one would be a plus and one would be a minus to DJ. The first being the minus is his height. I think he's 5'8". So that, it's always going to be a bit of a red flag for coaches in the NHL. But his big plus is that he plays a physical game. He loves hitting people. I just saw a video where he just absolutely laid out a guy who's 6'6". And that's awesome to see. And I really love his compete. I think on a right wing with Josh Norris and Brady Tkachuk, he could really, really thrive. Or maybe his teammate Brock Besser, who knows? But the no signing bonuses thing and cost control, that seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, Bennett, I don't know how much you follow Conor Garland, but
well, I follow him a decent amount because I do have him on my fantasy team. So I've been watching his career with interest this season. Some weeks he's been good, other weeks he's been pretty anonymous. But I mean, Vancouver have been a really up and down team. So I don't necessarily hold it against him. I think he has the skills to be an asset to this team. I would not hate going out and acquiring a guy like him for all the reasons you've already said. Physical edge, cost controlled, no signing bonuses. So obviously, anyone with signing bonuses is basically just stricken out of any trade consideration with the Sens. And he's 25 years old, I think, off the top of my head. So he's young enough to be able to grow with this team and grow with the guys around him. I don't have too much to add to that. I think it'd be a decent acquisition.
Cool. We'll touch on 2 other guys briefly. So Travis Connectny was the next one. He's 24 years old. He's a right winger. He actually played for the 67s on the same team that Cody Ceci played for. So that Dorian would have scouted him at the time, but now he's on the Flyers. He's got 4 years left on his deal at $5.5 million. 2 years in that 4 have signing bonuses of $2 million and $3 million. And he's got 25 points in 43 games this year. Philadelphia's been a disaster, but he's a guy who I've always thought was quite a good player. And personality-wise, I think Colin White's better. But at the time of the draft, I was really hoping that the Sens would announce Travis Connectny as their pick where they took Colin White, but it is what it is. And if he's available, would either of you guys be interested in him as a player to come in?
I think he's a banger player. we just disagreed. Look at that. I think he plays hard and can score. So I'd be interested, and he has a pretty decent contract.
Bennett, what about you?
I just think, I'm not an expert in the Flyers, but from the whisperings that I see on social media and, from coaches and stuff is that, I think there's some red flags about his attitude, and that's, I would always be hesitant to acquire guys like that. If the biggest knock against them is that they haven't been producing or something, that's fine. That can be changed by new line mates, new environment, all the stuff that comes with joining a new team. But attitude is kind of forever. And I know that Alain Vigneault, wasn't really a success in Philly. And perhaps there's a question of just two personalities that just did not clash. But whenever guys are getting benched and called out by the coach for, their compete level and stuff like that, it always places a little asterisk beside a player's name for me. And that doesn't necessarily go away easily.
Well, we'll quickly touch on one more, and it's Clayton Keller. So he's only 23, but he's signed to a long-term contract. So he has 7 years left, including this year, at $7.15 million. So his contract's definitely a little bit more pricey. He does have 3 years within that contract of signing bonus money, and he also has a no trade clause for the last 4 years of the contract. So if you're acquiring him, you're basically going to be in it for the long haul. But he's got 38 points in 45 games, 17 goals. He definitely is a player of interest. And yeah, any comments on Clayton Keller?
I don't think Arizona trade him. It's their only player next season.
They're just going to ice him, just him alone.
Yeah.
And Phil will be back or something on a 1 year, $10 million contract just so they can hit the cap floor.
Oh, you love to see it. I mean, the Twitterverse was afire because him and Brady were talking a lot. And I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. The signing bonus is obviously the issue, but he's had a resurgent season this year, and that's an absolute positive for me.
All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it there. We can touch on any potential deals, maybe more next week if we hear some more rumors on the rumor mill with the deadline coming up in a little while. So thanks everyone for listening or watching. Really appreciate you. You can find us on all our social medias on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and Reddit. And we'll catch you next episode. Go Sens, go.